All right, I've alluded to the subject of caste, but I want to explain that in further detail. So we'll talk about caste and gender roles in Hinduism. So dharma, of course, is the pattern for proper and appropriate living, moral law, or duty. Dharma is more than just this. It shares a cosmological dimension with the older Vedic idea of Rita. That is, the pattern for appropriate religion is rooted in the very order and nature of things. Dharma was a rather abstract concept. It had to be translated into specific codes to make it applicable to daily life. These were referred to as Dharma Shastras, literary codifications of the Dharma. And probably the most influential of this is something called the Laws of Manu. Laws of Manu. The Laws of Manu assign a different Dharma to a different strata of society. Dharma is specific to one's caste. By the way, Manu was a primordial being who was cut up involving the creation of the world. So another cosmogony. So let's talk about the caste system. The caste system solidified during the period of classical Hinduism. Right around the beginning of the transfer to the Common Era. It is a social, political, economic, and religious phenomenon. It is extremely complex, and so we're going to simplify it greatly. It's based on an assumption alien to Western thinking, that all people are not created equal. Rather, they are born with different intellectual and spiritual qualities and capabilities. Hindus see this as obvious. These innate differences predispose people to different occupations and responsibilities in society. These differences derive from how people acted in previous lives, the law of karma. Hierarchy is not based on wealth or earthly power, but on the degree of purity. Like Hinduism in India, caste is not an indigenous word. It is a Portuguese term to describe the strata of Hindu society and is somewhat imprecise. Caste is basically the combination of Varna and Jati. Varna is the traditional Hindu division of labor, there are four Varnas. Jati is your birth group, your subcaste within Varna. So, the Brahmins are the priests, and they're about 6 to 7%. The Shudras are the largest caste, so it's like a pyramid, really. Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. There's also a large group of people who have no caste. They're outcasts. They were referred to historically as untouchables. That's a pejorative term. Gandhi called them the Harijan, the children of God, but they call themselves Dalits. That's the correct term. Dalits means literally ground down, or the oppressed ones. Although devalued, the Dalits perform the vital function of removing or absorbing pollution from society. They are considered beyond purification. So it's weird, they both sort of are and are not Hindus. The Indian Constitution of the 1940s outlaws untouchability. It did so by adding them to the Shudra Varna as a separate scheduled caste. So technically, Indian constitutional law is blind about caste, but in reality, untouchability remains part of Indian life. Varnas are pan-Hindu, while Jatis are local groupings. Because they are local, the number is unknown. Estimates range over 3,000. There are hundreds of Jatis in each Varna. In one region, a Jati might belong to one Varna but belong to another in a different region. So Jatas, like Varnas, are hierarchical. There's no social mobility for individuals, but there may be mobility for a Jati as a whole. Jatis are very confusing. Jati members might imitate behaviors of higher caste to elevate the entire Jati. It has sometimes been possible to buy higher caste rank. Some lower caste kings have reconstructed their genealogies to prove they were Kshatriyas, but this is rare. Some scholars have speculated that the Jatis were rooted in the Indus Valley civilization, while the Aryans brought the Varna system as a division of labor, and it was then superimposed on the Jati system, but no one knows. In addition to occupation, caste determines many aspects of social life based on the dynamics of purity and pollution. Certainly there are marriage restrictions. Men cannot marry up caste. Women, in some cases, can. Even with the growth of love marriages, most Hindus today marry overwhelmingly within their caste in an arranged marriage. Caste determines the kinds of food one may eat. Brahmins are strict vegetarians, while meat eating may be acceptable at lower caste levels. So, it's widely known that Hinduism considers the cow sacred. Why? It's not entirely clear, but the cow symbolizes the entire animal world. The cow is revered for the milk it produces. It is life-giving. It is also symbolic of all mothers and female fertility, which is hugely important in Hinduism. So yeah, while a lower caste member might eat some kind of meat, it wouldn't eat beef. It also makes environmental sense. We're wolfing down cheeseburgers and steaks all the time. We don't think about it, but the whole world could not eat beef. I mean, it takes, for example, not to mention tons of water, 16 pounds of grain to create 1 pound of beef. It would be much more efficient and sustaining for us just to eat grain. So all of those, or some of them, might be part of the perfect storm that make cows so sacred in India. Lower caste members cannot perform upper caste duties, but if necessary, caste members can do lower caste work. It is not uncommon to see, for example, a Brahmin working in a business, but there are limits to this flexibility. Earlier Hindus and many modern ones believed that if everyone performed their dharma, that a balance would be maintained in the world and humans could live in harmony. Caste exists for the good of the world. Everyone should just do what they're supposed to do. To upset it leads to social and eventually cosmological chaos. Caste is normally enforced by family and intra-caste pressure. In other words, it is rarely a situation of the upper caste imposing on the lower caste. This creates great tension within individuals. Belonging to an upper caste does not mean greater wealth. So, for example, you might be a Brahmin man who, for whatever reason, is not a Brahmin priest, and you got to make a living somehow, so you work as an accountant, and your mother-in-law is furious about it. So let's look at the roles of each. Speaking of that, let's look at the roles of each Varna. Brahmins have 6 duties: teaching, studying, sacrificing for self, sacrificing for others, conducting sacrifices, making gifts, or receiving gifts. Notice that the 3 with the asterisk are the only ones which bring in income. So, Brahmins, sometimes they're not rich necessarily. That's not what this means. But they are the purest. They're at the top of the Hindu ladder. Kshatriyas protect the whole world. They protect from enemies. They maintain caste order. They're the warriors, the administrators. Vaishyas, says in the laws of Manu, be attentive to the business whereby he may subsist. Know weights, measures, the value of things. Have business savvy. Never say, I will never keep cattle. You're not too good to keep cattle. You're a Vaishya. You're a shopkeeper. You're a farmer. You're a rancher. By the way, I understand the word Patel is the name of farmer in Gujarati. That's why it's such a common name. Shudras, the servants, to serve Brahmins well is the highest duty of a Shudra. Why has this system persisted for over 2,000 years? Reincarnation and Dharma reinforce the idea that one's station in life is the result of their own actions. Fulfill your Dharma and advance. This promotes social order. Finally, Hindus believe that there is a way this world can be transcended. Do your Dharma, accrue good karma, and have a favorable rebirth. Now, that's Varna. Let's talk about the ashrama, men, women, and the stages of life. So people have different dharmas according to caste, but they also have different expectations based on gender. This creates patterns of life for men and women. The laws of Manu set forth an ideal pattern for upper caste males, the twice born. And by the way, I mean by that Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. Shudras don't really worry about this yet. A pattern has also emerged for upper caste females. Both ideals are based on the stages of life. This does not define the life of every Hindu today, but they did, and largely still do, depict the way life should be lived. And it's much more true in India. And remember that India has an enormous population of Hindus, and still today, huge numbers of them live in rural areas. So if I'm saying something, you say, well, that sounds like the Middle Ages. Well, it probably applies to parts of India today. So males undergo 4 orders, or ashramas. Sometimes the H is there and sometimes not, during the course of a lifetime. Number 1 is the Brahmacharya ashrama. This begins with the initiation ritual when a boy receives a sacred thread, a cord, like you might wear at graduation. This generally occurs at age 7 for a Brahmin, 10 for a Kshatriya, and 11 for a Vaishya. This ritual represents his second birth. That's why they're called the twice born. It has nothing to do with reincarnation. This is sort of like, it's an initiation ritual. All peoples have this. It's a sort of a bar mitzvah or a confirmation. In the classical period, this time marked the beginning of the boy's studenthood, when he would leave home to go study with a teacher, a guru. This education was very strict. It involved highly disciplined study of the Veda. Boys were not allowed to even look at women. Manu says that if a boy were to criticize his teacher, even if the teacher was wrong, that in the next life he would become a jackass. This is a good rule. Number 2 is the householder ashrama. Marriage is the expected status of an adult Hindu male. This stage would be entered in the early 20s. It involved marrying, raising a family, engaging in an occupation, bearing social responsibilities. This obviously is the stage when the two sexes interact. Next is the forest dweller ashrama. So a man, possibly his wife, would move to a more modest rural dwelling, withdraw from active social life, leave that to his oldest son, to become more introspective and spiritual. This was done only after raising a family and discharging all social responsibilities. The laws of Manu wanted men in their prime to be at the householder stage where they could be productive. This code was in part response to a problem: young men withdrawing from life to pursue religious experience. Society can't function if every young man does that. I'm talking about young men like Siddhartha Gautama and Mahavira. For the final ashrama is the sannyasa ashrama, or a man who undertakes this is called a sannyasin. This is the stage of renunciation. This is a stage of such severe austerity, few men would actually embark upon this. A man would renounce his former identity, everything associated with it, name, family, possessions, even caste, even his personal deity. He would become a wandering, solitary ascetic, subsisting only on the generosity of others. With no encumbrances, he could devote all his efforts to his search for God. Sannyasins wear orange robes, and India is literally has hundreds of thousands, if not, millions of old men in orange robes wandering around. In classical, medieval, and most of modern Hinduism, women have followed a three-stage pattern. Today, the roles of women are changing and increasingly resemble the life patterns of males. But again, that's more with modern Hindus or diaspora Hindus. Women must, the law of Manu says, women must be honored and adorned by their husbands, by their fathers, brothers, husbands, and brothers-in-law who desire their own welfare. Where women are honored, the gods are pleased. But Manu goes on to say that women are to be, quote, protected by their fathers, husbands, and then sons, and are unfit for independence. Stage 1 is girlhood. Girls were considered pure but inauspicious. When they mature, they become impure because of menstruation and sex, but auspicious because of their fertility. Girls remained under their father's watchful eyes and did not leave home to get an education. Second stage is householder. Until recent modern times, this happened very early. A girl's marriage might be arranged right after she was born. Sometimes the girl and boy were close in age, but more often the male was much older. So in India, marriages are alliances made in the interest of reproduction and economic stability. In most cases, the groom's family received a dowry payment from the bride's family, so girls were therefore an economic liability. Marriages among Hindus historically, and even today, rarely end in divorce. I mean, the marriages take days. Those two are glued together. On her wedding day, a girl will receive ornamentation marking her change in status. As a married woman, she will wear a bindi, a dot or a jewel on her forehead, marking the third eye of spiritual discernment. This indicates her status is auspicious and life-giving. After the wedding, the bride will go with the groom to live with his family. The mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship is notorious in Hindu culture. Hindu mothers adore their sons, and no woman can be good enough for them. Stridharma, or the duties of a good wife, the dharma of a wife. A wife should view her husband as a god, serving him, following him, praying for him, and eating after he eats. His premature death might be attributed to her bad karma. The husband should provide for the wife's material needs. He should also revere his wife as a goddess incarnate. Manu says that the happiness of the wife is the key to family stability. If a woman gives birth to sons, her status is vastly improved. There's a saying in India, a wish, may you be the mother of 100 sons, which sounds like a curse to me. A recent study of abortions in Bombay showed that 99 out of 100 were female fetuses. Girls are an economic liability. Despite this, though, Hindus love babies, girls and boys alike. Although this is the overwhelming pattern for Hindu women, Hinduism has great affection for some women who may have deviated from it. An example is the revered woman Lala, who lived in Kashmir in the 14th century. She left an unhappy marriage, had a horrible mother-in-law, to study spiritual discipline. Here's an image of her. She became a wandering teacher and poet. She's representative of a class of women who were revered for their love of God, even when that meant forsaking marriage. This explains the reverence Hindus have for the Christian Mother Teresa, who now, of course, is sanctified. Number 3, widowhood. Because of the frequent age disparity, husbands usually predecease their wives, leaving 2 very unattractive alternatives for women: widowhood or sati. Now, sati is a ritual in which a woman burns alive on her husband's funeral pyre. Sati means literally going with. So it was thought to create, sati was thought to create great karma. Sati sites became auspicious and are often sites of pilgrimage. Sati is based on a myth about a wife of Shiva, the goddess Sati. And if you know something about Hinduism, think, wait a minute, I thought Shiva's wife was Parvati. Yes, well, Sati was an incarnation of Parvati. And while Lord Shiva was gone, her father insulted Lord Shiva to her face, and she was so outraged she immolated and just burst into flame. And then Shiva comes home and finds her and holds her in his arms lovingly and wanders with his giant god steps all over India as pieces of Sati fall off. And each of the places where a body part falls has become an auspicious temple site. There's great contention over how voluntary this practice was. The British outlawed the ritual in the 19th century, and sati is now extremely rare, although there were documented incidents in 1987 and in 2002. The life of widows is difficult in India. Despite their relative youth, widows generally cannot remarry, so a widow would typically wear a white sari for the rest of her life. White is the color of mourning. Widows are viewed as inauspicious and unlucky. Here we see a group of Indian widows. So in 2000, there was an estimated 25 to 30 million widows in India. Reform movements seek to improve the plight of widows and of women in general. These movements have made progress, but change is slow. Actually, I heard a story recently about how widows who are often expelled from their in-laws' house are beginning to gather and live in ashrams together to support each other and kind of carve out a meaningful life. Having said that, paradoxically, there have been many powerful women in Asia, South Asia in the last century. So, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India have all had powerful female leaders.